3 weeks ago, the salty, damp sea breeze in Oceanside, California, made me feel its chill for the first time. That day, clutching scorching hot documents, I stood on the street, watching the silhouette of the Santa Barbara Mountains in the distance blur into a hazy gray against the twilight. It was only then, belatedly, that I realized my life had already been quietly upended without my knowing. My name is Lennon Rivers, and I'm 29 years old. I run a niche pottery studio in Oceanside. Ever since I was a kid, I've been the family's rock of stability. My parents always said, as long as Lennon's around, there's nothing to worry about. For the past 5 years, while running the pottery studio, I've quietly shouldered all of our family's expenses. The rent for our books, flowers, mixed space, the cost of floral supplies for my mom, the proceeds from my dad's used book buying business, even the travel expenses for my younger sister Theo, whenever she'd suddenly decide to go on an impromptu creative journey. But I never could have imagined that they'd been secretly holding on to a long-buried will. The entire book's flowers, every single detail, from the wooden bookshelves to the succulent pots on the windowsill, all of it was left to Theo. But me, this person who poured my heart and soul into supporting them for 5 whole years, hasn't even been mentioned once, let alone received a single dime of their wealth. My heart feels as if it's being squeezed by an icy hand, and even my breath stings like shards of glass. I'm sitting in the old pickup truck parked behind the studio's back door, the words on the documents trembling before my blurred vision. This very place that I've barely managed to keep afloat by emptying my savings and pulling endless all-nighters to meet pottery orders. What about Sia? She's always strutting around the California coast in flowing maxi dresses, camera in hand, completely oblivious to the family business. Even when Mom was swamped with floral arranging orders and couldn't handle the workload, Sia wouldn't lift a finger to help. I'm not saying I've never compromised. I've tried to comfort myself, telling myself that families should just learn to tolerate each other, but when this blatant favoritism hits me right in the face, all my concessions feel like nothing but a joke. Fury mixed with utter disappointment burns through my entire body, and I've made a decision I've never made before. Starting today, I'm stopping all financial support for them. No notice, no explanations. Without my financial support, the suppliers of old books and flowers started showing up at my door to demand payment, and the utility bills for the shop piled up higher than ever. Their phone calls bombarded my phone like a relentless series of death calls, starting with gentle inquiries and gradually escalating into accusatory interrogations. I let the calls ring until they'd automatically disconnect, and only when dusk began to creep through the glass windows of the pottery studio did I finally pick up the phone, slowly and deliberately. "It's too late," I said in a voice so calm it bordered on chilling, then hung up immediately, adding their numbers to my blacklist one by one. As I glanced back in the rearview mirror at the distant lights of the small town, I knew that an irreversible storm had already begun. The story that follows is filled with betrayal, retaliation, and unexpected twists. If you were me, faced with family members like these, would you choose to forgive or cut ties completely? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I'll read every single one carefully. Now, let me take you back 5 years to the very beginning of it all. 5 years ago, the old books flowers mixed space run by my parents was on the verge of closing down. My dad, Jasper, couldn't recover the money he'd invested in buying used books, and my mom, Cora, saw her floral arranging orders suddenly plummet. At that time, I'd just opened my own pottery studio in O'Haretown, and business was finally starting to pick up. As the only one in the family who could afford to chip in financially, as soon as they asked for help, I couldn't help but give in. I began drawing a monthly sum from the profits of my studio to help them cover rent, floral material costs, and even advance money to my dad as a deposit for purchasing used books. During peak seasons when material prices soared, I'd stay up for several nights in a row, working tirelessly to finish custom pottery pieces, just to scrape together a few $1,000s in working capital so that the old books flower sign could keep hanging and the lights at home could stay on. At first, I really didn't mind. That little shop, Old Books and Flowers, was my favorite place as a kid. In the afternoons, sunlight streamed through the blinds onto the pages of old books, and the scent of wild roses my mom had arranged mingled with the faint aroma of ink on paper. Those were the most vivid memories I had of home. I thought that if I could just hold on to that place, I'd be preserving the bond our whole family shared. But Sia's life was in stark contrast to mine. She always described herself as a freelance photographer, spending years wandering around picturesque spots like the Monterey Peninsula and Big Sur. Every so often, she'd return with a brand new high-end camera, flaunting photos of beach parties and wine-tasting tours she'd taken with her friends. She never once asked how Old Books and Flowers was doing, nor did she ever offer to chip in even a single penny to help out the family. When I scrolled through her social media posts, I'd see pictures of her standing by the seaside restaurant in Carmel, holding a glass of champagne and smiling brightly, while I was back in the pottery studio, kneading clay, my hands covered in mud, surrounded by unfinished orders. My heart felt as if it had been pricked by a tiny needle, but still I kept telling myself, family members, after all, will always find their own unique ways of living. What made me feel even more aggrieved was that my parents kept making excuses for Zia. Whenever I suggested she lend a hand around the house, they'd brush it off with some vague remark like, "Pursuing art isn't easy." To get through those tough times, I gave up on further studies in Italian pottery and poured all the funds meant for expanding my studio into Old Books and Flowers. During the day, I ran the pottery shop. At night, I helped my parents reconcile the accounts. I thought my efforts would be recognized, but now I realize they were simply taken for granted. I'd become so absorbed in managing the store's finances that I didn't even notice they'd already planned to leave everything to Zia. What had been a place full of childhood memories for me was nothing more than a stepping stone for her. It was only thanks to those childhood memories, hiding among bookshelves and listening to my dad tell stories about old books, that I managed to grit my teeth and keep going time after time. Yet every time Zia returned, carrying the scent of sea breeze and perfume, flaunting her new camera or new dress, my parents would greet her with smiles. But as soon as she turned her back, they'd immediately start urging me to figure out how to bring floral supplies into the shop, and they'd always say, "Zia is still young. Once she gets settled, she'll help out." Again and again, I kept believing, keeping on shelling out money, pulling all-nighters to rush orders, and taking care of trivial chores, all in the hope that our family could finally live a decent life. It wasn't until much later that I finally saw clearly. I wasn't sustaining our family at all. I was merely paying the price for their dream of Sia's. I'd become nothing more than a pawn on their chessboard, one they could sacrifice at any moment. And Sia? She just calmly and comfortably enjoyed my sacrifices. At the time, I was still blissfully unaware, convinced that if only I tried a little harder, things would get better. But all my efforts came crashing down on a rainy Wednesday. Dad Jasper called me and asked me to go to Elias Law Office in Santa Barbara to sign some routine paperwork for the store, saying Mom would be there too. I put down the pottery order I'd been working on and rushed over. What the lawyer handed me wasn't just any document. It was my parents' will. The property rights, management rights, and all belongings of Old Books Flowers were bequeathed entirely to Sia Rivers. My name didn't appear anywhere in the entire document. Trembling all over, I demanded an explanation, but the lawyer informed me that the will had been signed 3 weeks earlier and the procedure was entirely legal. My chest felt as if it had been struck by a heavy hammer, the pain so intense that I could hardly breathe. It wasn't just the loss of my shop, it was the utter betrayal by the person I loved most. Mom Cora sat across from me, her eyes avoiding mine, unable to meet my gaze. I turned toward her, my voice trembling with tears as I cried out, "Mom, all those 5 years' rent for Old Books and Flowers, the cost of materials, and last year's renovation expenses of over $30,000 were all paid by me. That money came from giving up further education and staying up late to meet orders." How could you just sit there and hand it all over to Z without saying a word? She paused for a moment, then whispered softly but firmly in her defense. Z's job as a freelance photographer is unstable. Old Books and Flowers can provide her with a steady source of support. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She's never lifted a finger to help this family. Not once. And yet, because I've given so much, am I supposed to end up with nothing? I gave up my dreams to hold this family together, and this is how you repay me? Mom finally just mumbled, "It's for the best of both of you." That sentence felt like a dull blade slicing straight through my heart. I knew full well it wasn't about what was truly best for us. It was blatant favoritism, a complete denial of everything I'd ever done for them. I pushed the folder back toward the lawyer, my hands trembling with rage. I paid for all the store's supplies, repairs, and rent. I poured every single penny of the Pottery Studio's profits into it, and this is how you repay me? Mom tried to interject, but I cut her off coldly. Don't even bother making excuses. I've had enough of you always thinking only about Gia. I jumped up abruptly and stormed out, never looking back. As I stepped outside the law firm, icy raindrops struck my face, and only then did I realize I was crying. This wasn't the pain of losing the shop. It was the utter despair of being betrayed by the people closest to me. They'd watched me sacrifice so much, yet they'd already planned long ago to exclude me entirely. In their eyes, all my efforts were simply taken for granted. I climbed into the car, started the engine, and the rain blurred the windshield. On my way back to Aohai town, my mind was flooded with images from all these years. The nights I stayed up late kneading clay, the moment I sold off my painstakingly crafted pottery pieces at a rock-bottom price just to scrape together enough money for the shop's rent, the exhaustion of helping my parents reconcile accounts until the early hours of the morning. Every single book and every single bouquet of flowers in Old Books and Flowers bore the mark of my own hard work and dedication. They were the very ties that bound me to my parents and to my childhood, a bond I'd always believed I'd never lose. Yet they'd handed it all over to ZA without a second thought. Why her? Why, after all I'd given, did I not even receive a shred of recognition? I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles turning white from the sheer force of my grip. I wasn't going to let this slide, not by a long shot. All along, I'd thought of myself as the family's backbone, the one who could hold everything together. Now I finally realized, in their hearts, I'd never really mattered at all. The words my mom used to defend Z still echo in my ears. Their pale, self-serving excuses felt like thorns, piercing me right to the heart. This isn't just unfair, it's simply wrong. I don't know exactly what I'll do next, but one thing is crystal clear. I'm never going to be that naive again. Never again will I foot the bill for their favoritism. I'm going to reclaim everything that's rightfully mine, no matter the cost. The next morning, I sat in my pottery studio, sunlight streaming through the glass windows onto the unfinished clay pieces. The sting of that will was still spreading deep within me, but I knew I couldn't afford to dwell any longer in sorrow or anger. I had to live for myself, for once. I turned on my computer and began canceling all financial support I'd been providing my parents. First, the automatic transfer for the rent of Old Books and Flowers shop. Then, the payment I'd been making on behalf of my mom's floral supplies. And finally, the household bills for water, electricity, and gas, all of which I'd been covering for years. I didn't hesitate for a single moment. Each cancellation I made lightened the weight in my heart just a bit more. For years, I've been their financial lifeline, their ATM for themselves and for Theo. Now, it's time for me to take back what's rightfully mine. After finishing everything, I put on my coat and drove over to Old Books Flowers. My heart was pounding, not out of fear, but out of anticipation. I was determined to show them that I was no longer the Lenin they could bully and sacrifice at will. This wasn't just about money, it was about dignity. Stepping into Old Books Flowers, I found Dad Jasper sorting through newly acquired used books, while Mom Cora stood behind the counter, pruning flower stems. The familiar scent of old ink mingled with the fragrance of fresh flowers. A smell that once felt warm to me now struck me as nothing but ironic. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to Dad, my voice calm yet firm, leaving no room for doubt. Dad, we need to talk. He looked up and froze for a moment when he saw my expression. I didn't give him a chance to change the subject. I just blurted out, all of this store's expenses over the past 5 years, $32,000 in rent, $15,000 for floral supplies, and $8,000 for shelf repairs. All were paid by me. I poured every penny of profit from my pottery studio into this place, even selling off the very set of pottery pieces I cherished most. And yet, you and Mom, you gave it all away to Zia? As I laid out each expense from those years one by one, his face paled a little more with every number I mentioned. I gave up the chance to go to Italy for further training. I gave up plans to expand my own studio, all just to keep this shop, to keep our family together. But what about you? Is this how you've repaid me? My dad fidgeted nervously, rubbing his hands together as he avoided meeting my gaze. He mumbled softly, "Zia hasn't had it easy. Being a freelance photographer means there's no security. She needs this shop way more than you do. Right now, your pottery studio business is doing great. You're doing really well," my dad said. Doing really well? I couldn't help but burst into laughter, a laugh laced with bitter sarcasm. I'm doing really well? I raised my voice, my tone brimming with anger that had been bottled up for far too long. Dad, every single day I stay up late working overtime to meet those pottery orders, and my hands are covered in cuts and calluses. To scrape together enough money for the rent on your shop, I've even given up on my own dreams. And what about Z? She takes my money to go on vacations by the sea and buys herself high-end cameras. She's never lifted a finger to help out around this house, yet you think it's her who needs this shop more? My dad opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but all that came out were empty platitudes like, family members should try to understand each other, or we're just stuck in this situation, words that sounded exactly like Mom's excuses. I shook my head. The last shred of hope I'd ever held for them finally shattered completely. You've made your choice. From today on, I'm not going to spend another dime on this shop, or on this family. Having said that, I turned around and walked away without looking back. As I stepped out through the door of Old Books and Flowers, a gentle breeze swept past, carrying with it the distinctive fragrance of plants and herbs unique to Ojai Town. Suddenly, I felt lighter than ever before, almost as if I'd finally shed a heavy burden that had weighed on me for 5 long years. Yet, at the same time, a sharp pang shot through my heart, the realization that after all I'd given, I'd ended up with nothing but this. They'd dismissed my efforts and denied my worth. Maybe such family members never really deserved my wholehearted devotion in the first place. Back at the pottery studio, Kola sent me a text asking how things had gone at the law firm. She bluntly said, "If you need any help, just reach out anytime. You've got to stand up for yourself." Kola was one of the few friends who knew about my long-term financial support for my family and genuinely cared about me. Her words struck a chord deep within me. I opened the bank app to check the transfer records and realized that over the past 5 years, I'd sent nearly $40,000 to my parents. That amount would have been more than enough to fund further studies in Italy or even help expand the studio. I used to take for granted the sacrifices my family made. Only now do I finally realize that my kindness was nothing more than capital they squandered freely. They've come to rely on my efforts, but secretly, they've been leaving everything to Z. This is a blatant betrayal. My gaze grew firm. Not only must I stop making payments, but I also have to reclaim everything that rightfully belongs to me and completely break free from their control. 2 weeks later, Cora brought a folder into the studio, claiming it contained the bank statement and loan contract for Old Books and Flowers, which she'd had a friend at the bank look into. The moment I glanced at it, my heart sank. 6 years ago, the shop had already taken out a loan of over $20,000 from the First National Bank of Ojai Town, and the loan was already on the verge of foreclosure. Pointing to the transfer records labeled Materials Procurement, Cora told me that the money I'd been sending every month hadn't been used to buy materials at all. Instead, it had all gone toward paying off old debts. With anger in her voice, she exposed the truth. Jasper and Cora have known about the loan all along. They've been hiding it from you, treating you like a tool to pay off debts. All those purchases and repairs were just excuses. It feels as though a huge boulder is pressing down on my chest, making it almost impossible to breathe. Over the years, I've trusted them unconditionally, handing over the money I'd worked so hard to earn, believing that I was safeguarding our home and preserving the memories of my childhood. Yet all along, they've been deceiving me, taking advantage of my kindness and trust, making me pay off debts I had no knowledge of whatsoever. When I think of Zia, she's out there, spending the money I earned through sheer toil on her own pleasures, taking artistic photos, completely oblivious to our family's debts and utterly indifferent to all my sacrifices. The hurt caused by this betrayal is far more unbearable than the unfairness of that will. It's not just about favoring Zia. It's about treating me like a fool, like an ATM machine for them. That afternoon, I clenched my teeth to hold back tears as I dialed the phone number of the #1 national bank in Aohai town, my hands trembling uncontrollably with anger and deep injustice. The bank's loan officer confirmed everything for me. The Old Books and Flowers loan really did exist, and if it hadn't been for my monthly payments, the shop would have been seized long ago. I asked them to provide me with all relevant loan agreements and repayment records. I wanted to know the whole truth. The next day, the bank mailed all the documents to my pottery studio. As I stared at those cold, hard contracts and repayment records, I finally saw clearly through my parents' true nature. They weren't just biased, they were also selfish and hypocritical. Over the phone, the bank's loan officer told me that since I'd been the one consistently repaying the loan and I had a stable source of income, my pottery studio, the bank was willing to give me first priority in purchasing Old Books and Flowers at a price half of the market rate and without any additional conditions. Holding the official letter from the bank, I read it again and again, almost unable to believe my own eyes. This is my chance. Not only can I reclaim the place I've poured 5 years of my heart and soul into, but I can also make my parents and Z pay the price for their selfishness. They thought they could just casually give Old Books and Flowers to Z, but little did they know, it was actually my own money that kept this shop afloat. Now, this shop rightfully belongs to me. My parents' lies have been completely exposed, and Z's so-called heir status has suddenly become utterly ridiculous and ironic. I'm no longer just angry. I now know exactly what I need to do. Old Books and Flowers is no longer some gift they can hand out at will. It's something I've earned with my youth and my sweat, and I'll take it back with my own 2 hands. I sit at the workbench in the pottery studio, a folder spread open before me. Cora was right. If it hadn't been for her, I might have remained blissfully unaware all along, forever paying the price for my parents' lies and their favoritism. I recall every little detail from all these years. The gentle tone my parents used whenever they asked me for money, their empty promises that, we'll make it up to you someday, the countless excuses they came up with for Zia. It turns out, none of it was real. They exploited my love and sense of responsibility, tying me firmly into their web of self-interest and making me pay the price for their mistakes and selfishness. I can picture what Old Books and Flowers would look like now. Those bookshelves I'd painstakingly repaired myself, the floral materials I'd helped my mom pick out, the pottery ornaments I'd stayed up late crafting to decorate the shop. This store has long carried my mark. It's the fruit of my labor, not some tool they're using to compensate Zia. It was I who kept the store alive, not them. Now, I finally have the chance to truly make it my own. I fold up the bank letter, my gaze growing utterly resolute. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it for fairness. I've put in so much effort, and I deserve what's rightfully mine. The thought of Z getting all the benefits without lifting a finger makes me simply unable to bear it. I don't know how my parents or Z will react when I propose buying Old Books and Flowers, but I'm fully prepared to fight. Old Books and Flowers is the fruit of my labor, the vessel that holds my childhood memories, and I'm not going to let anyone take it away from me again. As soon as I received the bank's letter, I immediately started raising funds. I sold several cherished sets of pottery pieces and emptied my studio's entire savings. Within a week, I'd signed all the necessary documents with the bank and officially become the legal owner of Old Books and Flowers. When I finally held the property certificate in my hands, I burst into tears of sheer joy, tears of relief. At last, I've reclaimed what's truly mine, and I'll no longer have to pay the price for others' selfishness. A few days later, Z burst into my studio clutching the invalidated will, hissing sharply that the shop should belong to her. I calmly yet firmly retorted, I've been footing all the expenses for the past 5 years, and I even paid off my parents' loan to keep the shop afloat. You haven't contributed a single penny. You have absolutely no right to claim it. She argued that my parents had the right to dispose of the shop and demanded joint ownership. I cut her off immediately. This shop is earned with my blood, sweat, and tears. It has nothing to do with you two. Furious, she slammed the door and stormed out. But I felt not the slightest bit soft-hearted. I'd had enough of compromise and humiliation long ago. That very evening, my parents sent me an email, not only without a hint of apology, but also accusing me of being immature and selfish, demanding that I hand over the shop to Z to preserve family harmony. They'd never once reflected on their own shortcomings. Instead, they blamed me for taking away what Z deserved. Their words were both laughable and heartbreaking. I deleted the email and blocked their email address, refusing to let them hold me hostage with moral guilt any longer. The next day, Milo, a calm and supportive friend who's always been there for me, came to the studio and affirmed my choice. You don't have to pay for their mistakes. Old Books Flowers was always meant to be yours. His understanding warmed my heart and strengthened my resolve to hold on to what I'd earned. He even offered to provide me with legal assistance. After becoming the shop owner, I immediately began renovating the space. I kept the old bookshelves and re-waxed them, arranged my own ceramic ornaments as decorations, hired staff to manage the used book section, and invited a florist to refresh the product selection. In this way, I transformed Old Books Flowers into a niche, multifaceted space that blends used books, floral arrangements, and ceramics. Every day, I'd first tackle the shop's tasks before heading back to the studio to create. Though busy, I felt incredibly fulfilled. This was the first time I'd ever lived fully for my own dreams. As I looked around at the warm lights in the shop and the bustling figures of customers and staff, a deep sense of pride welled up inside me. Today, the store is no longer a tool for my parents' favoritism. It's become a vessel through which I can realize my own worth. Thinking back on all the sacrifices and betrayals of the past, I'm left with nothing but peace and acceptance. I've finally broken free from the label of the dutiful daughter and become the master of my own life. A month later, a friend told me that Z had posted a lengthy article on social media slandering me, accusing me of snatching the store and being cold-blooded, while portraying herself as the victim and even using old photos from the store to falsely claim they were mementos left behind by my parents. Unaware people jumped on the bandwagon, labeling me unfilial and selfish. But deep down, I felt calm and chose not to waste my energy on those who weren't worth it. Soon enough, public opinion took a dramatic turn. Most residents of Auhai Town came to know the truth, that I'd been making sacrifices for years, while Z had never shouldered any responsibility. Kella explained the facts to our regular customers, Milo clarified the legal issues, and neighbors and longtime clients flooded the comment sections with messages defending me and acknowledging my efforts and rightful claims. This support fills me with gratitude and only strengthens my resolve in the choice I've made. After the public backlash, Z, together with her aimless surfer boyfriend Silas, sued me, using my parents' will as their pretext to fight for ownership of the shop. I wasn't intimidated in the slightest. After all, I had ample evidence at hand: the bank loan contract, repayment records, property transfer documents, and more. Milo helped me organize the evidence, and the lawyer I hired made it clear that victory was a foregone conclusion. A few weeks later, the court dismissed the lawsuit, and Z and her partner's appeal was rejected by their own lawyer. This legal battle finally opened my eyes completely to their true nature. Not long after, my Aunt Clara, whom I'd rarely kept in touch with and who ran an antique shop in Santa Barbara, sent me a letter, leveling baseless accusations against me, calling me unfilial and selfish, and demanding that I return the shop and apologize in order to preserve family harmony. After reading it, I simply threw the letter away. She doesn't know the truth, and she has absolutely no right to lecture me about anything. I've had enough of this bottomless moral blackmail. I'll no longer feel guilty over anyone's accusations. I blocked my parents, Yaya, Silas, and Clara's phone numbers and social media accounts, completely cutting off all contact with them. Although I felt reluctant to part ways, I felt even more relieved. Only by staying away from those who drained my energy could I truly take control of my life. After freeing myself from distractions, I threw myself wholeheartedly into my career. My pottery studio gained fame thanks to its pottery pieces titled Old Books and Flowers, and custom orders kept pouring in. Old Books and Flowers also became a niche Dhaka spot in our small town. Every day, I create in the studio and interact with customers at the shop, feeling both fulfilled and joyful. Watching my dreams come true and seeing people love my work fills me with immense satisfaction. Though the wounds of the past have left scars, they've now transformed into armor, making me stronger and braver. Finally, I've found my own sense of worth and a pace of life that feels right for me. 6 months later, I added a pottery experience zone to the renovated Old Books and Flowers. The shop's profits stabilized, and I even collaborated with Cora's Cafe to launch co-branded pottery cups and floral gift boxes, which have been selling exceptionally well. I learned from Cora that Sia and Silas are struggling badly. Silas's income as a surf instructor is highly unstable, and Sia's photography business hasn't shown any sign of improvement. They're barely able to afford the rent on their tiny apartment in Santa Barbara, and their former glamorous life has completely vanished. Because Sia once slandered me on social media, no one in town is willing to work with her anymore. I feel absolutely no sympathy for them. It's only natural that their selfishness and laziness have led them to this fate. It's exactly what they deserve for not cherishing their family and their life. Mom and Dad are facing equally tough times. They've sold their house to pay off debts and now rent a tiny studio apartment. Dad switched jobs to become a supermarket cashier, while Mom works as a restaurant waitress, earning just enough to get by. Cora told me they'd tried reaching out to me, asking for forgiveness and help, but since I'd blocked them, their efforts came to nothing. They even went behind my back, slandering me as ungrateful. But everyone in town knows the truth, and no one believes them. Deep down, I'm at peace. This is exactly what they've brought upon themselves. If only they'd treated me fairly and appreciated all I've done for them back then, none of this would have happened. I'll never help them again, nor will I ever forgive them. All I want now is to focus on my own life. Although it hurts me to learn that they rarely mention me these days, I feel more relieved than anything else. Since they've given up on me, there's no need for me to dwell on the past. Later, I had coffee with Cora at her cafe, and she told me that everyone in town admires how bravely I took back my shop and have been running it so successfully. No one even mentions Sia's smear campaign anymore. As I gaze out the window at the streets of O'Hare Town, I'm filled with deep emotion. If it hadn't been for Cora's support, I might never have made it through that dark period. I used to think blood ties made someone family, but now I finally understand. True family is those who are willing to stand by you and truly understand you during times of hardship. In the past, I gave my all to my parents and Sia, only to end up battered and broken. Now I finally realize that my efforts weren't something I was simply entitled to. I deserve to be cherished. Leaving behind those who drained my energy has been painful, but it was the right choice. I've learned to love myself and live for myself. Old Book's flowers and the pottery studio are symbols of my independence and resilience. I don't regret a single decision I've made. These experiences have helped me become the best version of myself. Thank you to everyone who has followed my story. Thank you for your support and understanding. It was your encouragement, especially during my darkest and most confusing times, that gave me the courage to keep going. I'd love to hear your stories. Have you ever faced unfair treatment from your family? Have you ever compromised yourself just to maintain so-called family harmony? How did you break free from those difficulties and start living for yourself? Feel free to share your experiences and thoughts in the comments. We can learn from each other and grow together. My story isn't just about the struggle over a shop. It's about a young woman's journey to break free from others' control, rediscover her self-worth, and bravely pursue her dreams. I hope my story can offer a little strength and courage to those who are going through similar struggles. Remember, you deserve to be cherished. You have the right to live for yourself. You don't need to pay for others' mistakes. Be brave. Stand up tall and reclaim what's rightfully yours. Go out there and pursue the life you truly want. Thank you to everyone who has followed my story. Thank you for your support and understanding. It was your encouragement that gave me the courage to keep going during the toughest, most confusing times in my life. I'd love to hear your stories. Have you ever faced unfair treatment from your family? Have you ever compromised yourself just to maintain so-called family harmony? How did you break free from those difficulties and start living for yourself? Feel free to share your experiences and thoughts in the comments. We can learn from each other and grow together. My story isn't just about the struggle for a shop. It's about a young girl's journey to break free from others' control, rediscover her self-worth, and bravely chase her dreams. I hope my story can give a little strength and courage to those who are going through similar struggles. Remember, you deserve to be cherished. You have the right to live for yourself, and you don't need to pay for other people's mistakes. Be brave, stand up tall, reclaim what's yours, and go after the life you truly want.